Welcome back for part 2 of my future planning series, where I lay out my broad proposal for a transit build-out of the LA metro region. In the past, I've made 2 videos outlining my thoughts on long-term plans for LA Transit, so why am I making a third? Well, 2 reasons. First off, my thinking on this constantly evolves. I literally have a change already from the previous video in this series from a few months ago. And second, this time I'm expanding out to the entire LA metro region and then some. Oh, and third, because f*** you, it's fun. So, especially given recent events, how likely is what I'm about to lay out? Well, for the next X amount of years until this country unf***s itself, whatever that looks like and however long that takes, future planning will probably take a backseat to attainable wins. As I suggested was possible in the first video. But this is a plan that would unfold on a 50-year timescale at least. So we were always going to be looking past the immediate political reality for something like this, because the amount of investment suggested here was always going to require a political paradigm shift no matter what, even if we were starting from a Harris administration. And in the near term, a hostile federal government gives California more of an incentive to differentiate itself and move forward on its own, so having an ideal future plan in hand now is still a very useful exercise. Logistically, parts of this would be pursued by a number of agencies, independently and concurrently. The upshot is that the cost of transit infrastructure overall could and hopefully would come down quite substantially for 2 key reasons. One, the more you build, the cheaper it should become, because we should have seasoned in-house teams, probably at the state level, that handle all of our clearance design, engineering, and procurement work. There is no real serious movement towards this right now, but it should be an immediate priority, as I have recently ranted about in the 2024 update video, and discussed at length in my costs and timelines video. And second, the less you prioritize car infrastructure, the cheaper this all becomes. For example, I have a number of BRT lines running on streets that would traditionally be seen as too narrow to accommodate them, meaning we'd be converting car lanes to BRT lanes and leaving 1 car lane in each direction on the occasional street. Worth noting that I have opted on leaning far more towards grade separation of our rail network in the future, which adds a lot of cost, but in a transit-forward future, it should be expected. Finally, this is also taking into account the desperate need for density near transit and more housing overall. Ideal corridors to me are A, ones that already have high demand of course, or B, ones with both moderate demand but also large infill development potential. A plan such as this would need to be enacted hand-in-hand with a regional plan to rezone and incentivize high-density housing, without strict parking requirements, but with minimum affordability requirements, within easy walking distance of transit stops. There will be more talk of that in the line-specific videos to follow. And while I'm obviously not the right person to make these decisions or decide these plans, being very fundamentally unqualified, I am at least decently well informed, so I think outlining these ideas isn't a huge waste of time. Just a minor one. You know, the normal kind. So, we're going to start by talking about regional and intercity rail, because the routing of the tracks is by and large mostly decided, and we're going to make what use we can of existing infrastructure and plan around that to some degree. Then I'm going to go subregion by subregion and lay out transit lines. And for regional and intercity here, I'm bringing back this dark map of mine from 2022. What can I say? I love this thing. And unlike in my annual update videos, I will not be going in order of opening dates here. There's not a ton of rhyme or reason to the order, we're just trying to get to a specific endpoint. So let's begin with some housekeeping, adding in the will they or won't they Metrolink station at Placentia that seems to be eternally coming soon, the in discussion ones at Pico Rivera, LAUSC Medical Center, and Pacoima, where the East San Fernando Valley line will terminate in my plan, adding a Westfield North County station to the Sprinter, adding special events Convention Center and Del Mar Fairgrounds stations to the Coaster and Surfliner. The Del Mar Bluffs tracks would also get moved here, though that isn't shown. Tunneling through to avoid this loop on the Surfliner and Coaster with a connecting UTC station, and moving the tracks off the coast at San Clemente with a single new San Clemente station, along with adding a Camp Pendleton station further down because Marine should have trains too. And not pictured on this map because it was announced just after I was too far along on the graphics, a Meade Valley station on the 91 Paris Valley line between Moreno Valley March Air Force Base and Paris downtown, which just got funded. Now, let's talk high-speed rail, because that's going to be building a lot of enabling infrastructure that we'll make use of. California High-Speed Rail is design certified to Union Station and has its final EIR out to Anaheim. And the first thing we're going to do is actually change the certified plan, as I harped on in the previous video, and alter California High-Speed Rail's route so that it bypasses Burbank Airport, remaining on the Antelope Valley right-of-way, and instead builds platforms at downtown Burbank Station. From where California High-Speed Rail emerges from its tunnel to the entrance to Union Station, it'll build a new, fully grade-separated, electrified pair of tracks that it'll share with Metrolink, alongside a second pair of existing but moved tracks that will be shared use between Metrolink and Freight. In my plan, we're going to electrify the second pair as well. It's a similar story to Anaheim. One new pair of electrified tracks, and the second pair of BNSF tracks will get electrified in my version. In the existing plan, it'll be grade separated until it veers off the BNSF right-of-way and onto the public-owned right-of-way, but in my version, we'll grade separate that last bit in Anaheim as well. In my version, we'll also add back in one intermediate station in Norwalk Santa Fe Springs that got axed. Eagle-eyed document readers might have noticed that high-speed rail under the current plan is actually expected to have the same exact travel time between Union and Anaheim as existing unelectrified Metrolink trains. Your eyes do not deceive you. Unfortunately, this stems from the fact that basically every available slot on this extremely high-traffic freight and passenger corridor will get used, meaning you can't run trains any faster without them running into each other. At least, unless you electrify Metrolink, keep freight trains off the high-speed passenger tracks, and build bypass tracks at Wayne Park and Fullerton. This plan would recommend all three. This is also BNSF's only artery into Los Angeles, so they'll fight anything beyond what they've already agreed to tooth and nail. But if they won't budge, that's what eminent domain is for. Next on high-speed rail, we of course have Brightline West from Vegas to Rancho Cucamonga already under construction, and we'll build the High Desert Corridor and have it serve Brightline West services both to Union Station via Palmdale and north to San Francisco and eventually Sacramento. For the San Diego phase of California High-Speed Rail, we're going to do what I suggested in my Ontario Airport video and build a brand new exclusive electrified grade-separated right-of-way along the 60 up the San Gabriel River in the median of the 10, ducking into a tunnel to hop over to the Pomona Rail right-of-way, again adding two exclusive grade-separated tracks with a stop at Ontario Airport, and following the Corona path down towards San Diego, where I will shift the Murrieta station slightly to stop at Temecula, keep the planned stop in Escondido, and then to Santa Fe Depot instead of an airport station, which I think has already been nixed actually. Finally, we'll take it all the way to the border at San Isidro, which is not currently planned. You may have noticed that I opted to skip all the optional intermediate stops between Union and Ontario at El Monte, West Covina, or Pomona. I decided El Monte and Pomona were just too close to the adjacent stops, and while West Covina would actually theoretically work well with my plan, as I'm going to turn it into sort of a third meeting place between LA and San Bernardino County Transit, along with downtown Pomona and Pomona North, it's actually geographically very difficult to make happen in a way that would facilitate good connections, and it's still pretty short station spacing for high-speed rail, so I opted to lose it. Why am I going for the 60 routing instead of using the 10 the whole way, or partway and using the San Bernardino line? While I think an electrified San Bernardino line can be a stopgap to get Brightline West to Union until this dedicated high-speed rail corridor is built, there are so many grade separations that would need to be constructed for a true high-speed connection that you're basically rebuilding it from scratch anyway, and trying to engineer a second track into the single-track sections of the 10 will be difficult enough to be extremely expensive, I think. So my plan opts to leave the configuration of the 10 between Union and El Monte as is and work around it. Speaking of Brightline West, as we also discussed in my Ontario Airport video, we'll take its tracks from Rancho Cucamonga down the creek to a Y west of the airport station, and we extend Brightline West services to Union via this new second branch, and to San Diego's Santa Fe Depot. Now, you may think we're done with high-speed rail, but not quite. There's one glaring misconnection with a viable high-speed rail city pair: Phoenix and beyond to Tucson. Now, how to connect with Phoenix is a pretty big open question. I think this is a Brightline route, and I think it mostly travels in the median of the 10 into the Coachella Valley. From here, there's essentially three choices. You take the long way around and avoid any major urban area by connecting it to Brightline West around Victorville. The upside of this is that the right-of-way would be the cheapest and probably reflects the sort of choice that Brightline West would be most likely to make. The downsides are obvious. It creates a very circuitous route between LA and Phoenix, and is still forced to contend with some serious train issues that likely wipe out the value of avoiding most urban areas. The second option is to just follow the 10 almost the whole way. This also mostly parallels the mainline tracks, so it could use a blend of the mainline right-of-way and the 10 right-of-way to create a new electrified track. Train in the urban area here will probably force some tunnels to keep track geometry straight enough for high speeds, probably like 9.5 miles or so, and it will construct a San Bernardino station in a relatively remote spot, but ultimately this is a sweet spot between directness and cost that I imagine will probably win out. And then there's the third option, which would involve a lot of tunneling, about 19 miles, but which would be able to directly serve the downtown of the biggest city in the Inland Empire and the 12th most populous city in California, Riverside. This is one area where I'm going to stretch things a little bit and spend a lot of money, because I think this would be a really great high-speed rail connection. So, it's very easy to split high-speed rail tracks off of the Corona route and add new exclusive tracks briefly along the LA subdivision right-of-way, or it can electrify and share them, as we're going to be claiming these tracks for passenger rail shortly. But because we want straighter track geometry that gets tricky with this right-of-way, we're going to split them off again where the LA sub turns south and dive into a long tunnel to reach downtown Riverside, where it would build a new, very expensive, fully underground station connecting to the existing one. From there, it continues in this massive tunnel until it emerges in a viaduct alongside the 215 through Moreno Valley. It'll tunnel under the mountains and then emerge and build new grade-separated tracks alongside the existing rail right-of-way until it splits off and builds a Palm Springs station at least a little closer to the city than the horrible current one, and that would make sense for Brightline's real estate-focused business model anyway. It rejoins the existing rail right-of-way and then hops over to the 10 median, where it continues happily to the 130-degree furnace that is Arizona, going through Phoenix to Tucson. On the map, I'm drawing the Arizona Brightline as a separate service to distinguish it a little better, as it can reach Union via the more direct route, but go around through the Victor Valley to reach San Francisco and Sacramento to avoid overloading the extremely crowded tracks north of Union Station with more trains. So folks, we now have high-speed rail complete, right? Nope. One more thing. I think a direct high-speed rail connection between Union and LAX would be very valuable. So, let's take a look. We're going to split it off the high-speed rail tracks here with a new flyover that takes it to this right-of-way, where it can proceed on viaduct until it needs to duck underground around here, since the Harbor subdivision is being converted into bike and pedestrian space. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about this corridor under Slauson that we'll get to in a bit, but suffice to say, the high-speed trains will be non-stop between Union and LAX, fully underground. Let's move on to Metrolink. The LA Metro Region's Regional and Commuter Rail Agency runs, at present, 7 regional rail lines that run on mainline tracks, sharing with freight and sometimes owned by freight, and 1 DMU, or Diesel Multiple Unit Hybrid Rail Service, Aero, in San Bernardino County. Now, one of the most crucial enabling projects for regional and intercity rail is Link Union Station, which builds a viaduct with 3 tracks that high-speed rail and others will be using. Unfortunately, it's been value engineered down to a measly 2 tracks, but let's operate on the assumption that we can somehow restore this project to its former glory, because it's kind of crucial. In this scenario, we could merge Metrolink lines on either end of Union Station to run longer one-seat rides. The most obvious place to start, in my mind, is combining the popular Antelope Valley and Orange County lines into the AVOC line. Next, let's look at the Ventura County line. On the north end, there's talk of serving Santa Barbara with Metrolink service, and I think the best way to do that is to branch the Ventura County line on this end. Most trains can continue from Oxnard to the downtown Ventura station, all the way up to Goleta, which can get people in Ventura County more frequent service to Santa Barbara Airport with a shuttle connection. Then, I think a more infrequent branch hits the current East Ventura stop with a relocated platform, and makes use of this disused right-of-way to take service all the way to Fillmore. Yes, these are relatively small towns, but relatively small towns get good service from regional rail on the East Coast all the time, and with impressive ridership too. On the south end, I think it splits off of Lawson onto this Union Pacific right-of-way and uses the to-be-relocated single freight track alongside the Southeast Gateway line with a connection in Atlantic, and coming all the way to the edge of Long Beach Airport on the right-of-way with a second station at south. At the airport border, it'll duck underground and branch into 2 new tunnels. One to Long Beach Airport with more infrequent service, and one to Long Beach Waterfront with an intermediate station on Anaheim at Cambodia Town. Note that this does differ from the suggested routing of the Long Beach Metrolink line, which would have it veer off on this existing and mostly grade-separated right-of-way before constructing new tracks all along the LA River. But I'm not convinced this would actually wind up being meaningfully cheaper, especially if the waterfront station on my plan was above grade, leaving the frankly optional Cambodia Town station as the only excavated station. So I'm going to stick with the tunnel. Now, the 6 miles of single track forced by the Southeast Gateway line, and the fact that it'll probably need to remain shared with some freight, will restrict frequencies a bit on this end, but a few strategic grade separations at Carson, Del Amo, Candlewood, and Artesia would make the whole southern half of this fully grade separated and suitable for high speeds, enabling an express service between Long Beach and downtown LA to supplement the A-Line's local service. Then, a truly big change. As discussed in the Ontario Airport video, let's swap the LA and Alhambra subdivisions. A recap. While the existing Metrolink SCORE program is adding double tracking and other improvements on many of their lines to be able to massively increase frequency, they can't really do much for the Riverside line, whose awful service comes from the fact that it runs entirely on Union Pacific's crowded LA subdivision, which is part of a major freight route that, in combination with Union Pacific's Alhambra subdivision, operates as sort of a one-way loop through the Inland Empire and San Gabriel Valley to downtown. The only passenger service that currently runs on the Alhambra subdivision is the 3 times a week Amtrak Sunset Limited Intercity train. In 2011, there was a recommendation to upgrade both subdivisions to double or triple track where possible, and separate out passenger and freight traffic almost entirely. How it would work is like this. The Metrolink Riverside line would switch entirely to the Alhambra subdivision west of, in my plan, Ontario Airport, with new tracks along the transmission line right away here that would then allow the trains to continue along the LA subdivision to Riverside. While some freight trains would occasionally need to use these tracks, it would be now primarily double-tracked passenger, allowing a massive increase in service. Meanwhile, this new combination of the Western LA sub and Eastern Alhambra sub would become entirely freight, moving in both directions. You sacrifice the Montebello Commerce, East Ontario, and current industry stations on the Riverside line for new stations at Alhambra, Almaty, we'll get to that in a second, a new industry station over here, a new Cal Poly Pomona station over here, downtown Pomona, downtown Ontario, and Ontario Airport. And here I'll mention that we're going to electrify any and every Metrolink track and the Pacific Surfliner Lawson tracks because, by God, we gotta do that sometime. Now, the question is, with the possibility of transferring between 3 lines now at Almaty Station, San Bernardino, realigned Riverside, and potentially the Sunset Limited, do we move the Metrolink station to the busway station as ultimately planned, where only the San Bernardino line can stop? Yes and no. We actually get to have our cake and eat it too. The San Bernardino line will stop at the busway at a new station instead of the existing downtown Almaty, which will be served by a new line that we'll discuss in a minute. But we're going to make a new transfer station to transfer between all of them at 5 points. And the reason why it's here will become clearer later in the video. I'm saying that a lot, aren't I? But first, more about the San Bernardino line, because it's actually going to become 2 lines, 1 local and 1 express. See, while much of the San Bernardino line can be one-day double-tracked, as I mentioned a bit ago, it will be rather difficult to do so within the 10 without getting rid of the Almaty busway, which is something I've gone back and forth on like 100 times, but very long story short, I've settled on keeping the Almaty busway and interstate median Metrolink tracks as is, just electrified. By running the local San Bernardino line onto the Alhambra subdivision with the Riverside line to Union Station after Almaty, we can reserve the existing 10 right-of-way for express trains that can continue on to LAX, adding stops along the high-speed rail tracks in a tunnel, with bypasses for high-speed rail at Slauson, Vermont, and downtown Inglewood to facilitate transfers. This tunnel is expensive as fuck. I know, and believe me, we're not even close to done with it. The OCIE line I'm not touching, but the 91 Paris Valley line will get extended to Hemet and San Jacinto with an obvious infill at UC Riverside, and the new Riverside line will interline with it until Paris South, after which it'll break off along a brand new right-of-way along the 215, a plan that has actually been lightly steadied to Temecula, where I terminated at that high-speed rail station that I've relocated a little bit from Murrieta. While that covers Metrolink's regional rail links, we're not done because we still have the hybrid rail aero service. Now, the rail integration study finally just released, and a few months back, there was an intriguing hint that it was going to recommend an S-Bahn style line between downtown Burbank and Norwalk Santa Fe Springs. Now, the German S-Bahn is a system that uses mainline tracks to provide a more local service than regional rail tends to provide, with the most frequent stops of any service along a mainline, and often passing through a city center on a shared trunk with branches in the suburbs. It kind of is a sort of hybrid rail, like Metrolink's Aero service, and if we increase the frequency of Aero, convert it to electric with the rest of the Metrolink system, and extend it on the western end, we can make it into kind of an S-Bahn service for the Inland Empire, one of several S-Bahn style hybrid lines that I'll add under Metrolink's management. It adds infills at Pepper and Cherry along the San Bernardino line tracks, and after Rancho Cucamonga shares Brightline's tracks to Ontario Airport, but it comes in from the east side so it can continue on the new Alhambra subdivision to the new Cal Poly Pomona station, where it can swerve off into a tunnel to directly serve said college's north campus, and then to Mount San Antonio College. Now, the second of these 4 hybrid rail services I began to create exactly as Metro had initially described. Coming north from Norwalk with infill stations at Los Nietos, River Park, Fletcher, Colorado, and Grandview, the latter 4 stations previously studied for such a service, even though it wasn't ultimately recommended. And then continuing past downtown Burbank on the Lossing Corridor all the way to Chatsworth, adding valuable infills at Victory, Lancashire, Woodman, Sepulveda, Balboa, Tampa, Winnetka, and DeSoto, allowing the creation of future transit-oriented development zones all along the Lossing Corridor here to help us densify intelligently. I'm calling this the Meridian Line due to its somewhat centered north-south routing along the trunk. But the catch is, when Metro actually released the rail integration study, the final proposal for their version of this line was substantially different than what they had suggested in the past. They did extend it up to Chatsworth like I did, but also down to Laguna Niguel Mission Viejo, and with 0 infills along the entire line. The idea is that this is a quote-unquote tripper service that adds either hourly or half-hourly trains that utilize the Link Union Station run-through tracks, connecting areas north and south of Union and adding service along the busier portions of the line. Ultimately, this is more akin to a traditional Metrolink line than my hybrid line, and I'm going to leave this new concept off the map in favor of my idea because A, I've already linked Metrolink lines through Link Union Station, albeit I connected the Antelope Valley line to Orange County instead of the Ventura County line, which is what I'm doing now with this Meridian line. And I'm under the assumption that we're going to continue increasing standard Metrolink service all the way through anyway. I could extend the Meridian line down to Laguna Niguel instead of stopping it at Norwalk like their initial idea, but again, these graphics already got made, so in this case, I'll leave it where I put it. Moving on. With our third hybrid rail service, we're using that new LAX tunnel again and adding another hybrid service that duplicates the LAX San Bernardino line, but branches instead to the Alhambra sub after Union, with infills at Lincoln Park, CSU LA North, Fremont, San Gabriel, Rosemead, and with platforms on the Alhambra sub where the current El Monte station is. I'm calling this the Angel Line. You could eventually run this as one service with Aero, potentially. And fourth, I'm doing an Inland Empire special that I'm calling the Imperial Line, starting at Cal State San Bernardino, traveling on the mainline track through San Bernardino to Riverside, where one branch will go to UC Riverside, and with infills at Valley College, Olive, and Colton. The main branch continues along the BNSF right-of-way to Corona West, with infills at Victory, Donder Park, Arlington, Tyler, Pierce, and McKinley, and with an infrequent branch traveling south along a disused old rail right-of-way to connect Corona's high-speed rail station to Mescal Canyon, Lake Elsinore, Clinton Keith, Calmia, and then terminating at the Temecula high-speed rail station. These 4 hybrid lines provide Metro-like service to 2 key corridors in the Inland Empire, and represent the cheapest way, given the Alhambra sub switchover at least, to add Metro-like service to this part of the San Gabriel Valley and to this part of the San Fernando Valley. It also takes advantage of the existing corridor to provide Metrolink service between downtown and Glendale, which takes pressure off of other Glendale connecting metro services to serve downtown, as we shall soon see. Okay, almost done, finally, with regional and intercity. Yes, this is a long video. Yes, I have a job. Yes, I sometimes sleep. We're expecting a daughter in February, so I gotta get this metro fix on while I still have the smallest semblance of free time. With Intercity Rail, there's a Coachella Valley service being studied along this corridor that Amtrak would operate, planned initially for twice a day, adding infills at Loma Linda, Beaumont, Mid-Valley, Indio, and Coachella. There's also a private sleeper train being planned to San Francisco called the Dreamstar. It may be obsolete when California high-speed rail finally opens between LA and San Francisco, but also maybe not if it's enough of a novelty. Next, there's been some discussion of adding back Coast Daylight service along the Coast Starlight route, but heading directly to San Francisco like the Dreamstar and running more frequently, and continuing on south to San Diego. And finally, despite getting painfully voted down weeks ago as part of San Diego's Measure G, I've got San Diego's Purple Line commuter rail, which I've extended all the way to Del Mar Heights. Alright, I think that's everything on my regional intercity map. SoCal is a huge and dense region, and this would allow people to rapidly travel between different parts of it pretty damn efficiently. For more local service, though, let's shift over to a version of my metro map, expand it to include Ventura, San Bernardino, Riverside, and Orange counties. It's a chonker. It also makes After Effects beg me for the sweet release of death. So, to do any kind of rail animation on this map, I kind of need to split it into sections, which also helps me tackle this in a semi-organized way. Note that this map is starting with my interpretation of all Measure M projects, and the regional and intercity lines we just added already drawn on. Let's begin in the northwest corner with Ventura County. The best way to serve Ventura County is with BRT, and I want to cover the most space with the fewest lines possible for efficiency, and I landed on 3 lines. The first serves the main trunk of Ventura and Oxnard. While I don't think exclusive BRT lanes to Ojai is realistic, I extended the line north to Ojai in mixed flow for a 1-seat bus ride. Similarly, on the south end, I have it hitting Point Mugu and going all the way to LA County, just past the border, where you can see a sliver of blue backing behind the line where it creeps into LA County. Since this map will have some county-level transit agencies with lines that extend past their county borders, I'm calling that out with colored backings where they're out of county. Ventura County is blue. Second, I have a line that starts at Oxnard State Beach Park, sharing some space with the first through Oxnard, coming into Camarillo, and continuing along the 101 corridor to Thousand Oaks, where it will terminate on this side of the county line at Westlake Boulevard. And third, I have a BRT line interlining with 2, and serves CSU Channel Islands in mixed flow before hitting Camarillo and hopping up to Simi Valley and ending at its Metrolink station. You can see on satellite view here how these 3 routes cover much of the density in Ventura County, along with some big ridership driver areas that are outside of it, such as CSU Channel Islands. And while 3 BRT lines and some new Metrolink service aren't going to turn Ventura County into some kind of transit heaven, they will enable a lot more transit-only trips, especially combined with local bus service, and provide a spine for Ventura County to focus building residential density. On to the valley. Now, the San Fernando Valley actually presents some of the most brain-twisting dilemmas of how to get an ideal future transit grid due to the way existing transit is routed and some of the interesting geography here. I have gone back and forth on this so many times over the years with different choices in every video, and I even went back and forth about 4 times planning this video, finally landing on my current version after I thought I was already done. I'm calling this issue the Valley Knot. And unwinding it is actually the single most impactful thing that I think an official long-term transit plan could do, because it will affect planning a huge part of our system. Pulling back to a simplified geographic map shows where our lines are after Measure M, including a Phase 1 Vermont line and the Arts District station, assuming the K line builds the hybrid without any junction boxes, and briefly ignoring the hybrid mainline rail lines. Also, BRT is shown in dashed gray to distinguish it. Now, let's start with some principles. A. There are some areas that absolutely should be served by rail in the final build-out due to corridor density and ridership drivers. These are CSUN and the Reseda Corridor, the Ventura Corridor, the Burbank Studio District, and downtown Burbank. and Burbank Airport should get a Metro Rail connection in addition to its Metrolink connections. B, which is where things start to get tricky. We want direct corridor connections from downtown to Glendale to Burbank, from the Valley to Pasadena via Glendale, from Hollywood to Burbank Airport, from downtown Burbank to Burbank Airport, from the central part of the Valley to the Burbank Studio District, and most strictly, from the Ventura Corridor to the Burbank Studio District if we can swing it. C, where possible, we'll try to extend existing lines, and D, we try to avoid adding interlining that will negatively affect headways on the lines. You'll see D will get somewhat violated in favor of other principles at the end. That's where I ultimately chose to make concessions. So, keeping in mind principle C, what are our options when extending the stubs of existing lines? As you can see, a lot. And this isn't even accounting for how we could route more BRT service. It's a little overwhelming. One option I am not displaying here is the option of running the B line along the G line route, which Measure M will eventually convert to light rail as one of its final projects. Even though this was the original intention for this corridor way back when, I really don't think this will happen because the conversion will be comparably cheap by only grade separating some key intersections, and it will be a lot more expensive if you need to grade separate the whole route, which isn't baked into the Measure M cost, so I'm going with most likely to happen here. Now, here is how I routed the network in my 2021 video, and here is what I did in my 2022 video. The eagle-eyed will notice that a few ideas are now closed off to us. For example, my routing of the East San Fernando Valley line from the 2021 plan won't work because the hybrid is probably taking up that space on Santa Monica now, with likely no junctions for interlining. Plus, we don't want it to take over the Alhambra sub in the San Gabriel Valley now because I want to use that for Metrolink service. Plus, my routing of the Southeast Gateway line in that plan assumed the 7th Metro terminus of Phase 2 would get chosen, which it did not. None of these issues exist in my 2022 plan, but it's arguably not ideal to have the East San Fernando Valley line terminate in West Hollywood, nor to have zero rail service on Ventura or Reseda, which I was covering with BRT in that plan. Both versions, however, did three things the same. They took the B line to Burbank Airport, had the G line go directly to downtown Burbank via Chandler before taking over the NoHo-Pasadena busway with a rail conversion, and had the K line take over the NoHo-Pasadena bus on Olive before switching to the Metrolink right-of-way at downtown Burbank to hit Burbank Airport North. Now, I've scrapped all of that. A big reason why is that we're starting now from the idea that there could be a hybrid rail route at least between Norwalk Santa Fe Springs and downtown Burbank, which again I've named the Meridian Line. This will do a couple of things that free our hands a little bit. First, it will provide a Metro-like service between downtown Glendale and Burbank, relieving other lines of needing to serve it. Now, this could get extended up to Burbank Airport North for a direct connection between downtown Burbank and the airport, but I think it's actually more valuable to bring this line along the Ventura County line tracks, like I mentioned earlier, all the way to Chatsworth, a route that I had been considering having the B line take over, but this gets us that same service with a ton of infill station potential, but crucially, no need for new tracks, other than the double tracking we should be doing anyway. Now, I really think connecting the East San Fernando Valley line and the Southeast Gateway line into one via Echo Park, Silver Lake, and Hollywood is the best move. And given the probable reality of the hybrid being chosen, I think it's better to do it along this route that skirts around the hybrid and runs on Ventura for a while. That, I think, makes more sense than sending it directly to Sherman Oaks from West Hollywood because of the length of that tunnel, plus this way you get more connections. However, that does mean that to have a continuous Ventura corridor, we will need interlining. Now, for a while I thought it best to have a new Reseda-Ventura line terminate in Sherman Oaks here to avoid interlining. But here's the thing. This gap really bothered me. The Burbank Studio District is a huge employment zone and ridership driver, and requiring a slower BRT transfer to get to it from almost anywhere in the valley seemed really non-ideal. So I figured, screw it, we'll interline and bring it here, bring the K line to here, and because I no longer see it as politically viable to use Chandler as an easy right-of-way due to it being a popular bike path now, and because I think a direct route to the Studio District is actually more valuable than the direct route to downtown Burbank for most of the valley, I have the G line roughly following the NoHo-Pasadena route as well and coming here for a triple transfer station, a tricky one that I'll discuss in greater detail in a future video in the series. So, from here, what goes where? Well, I think that having the K line go north to Burbank Airport North, requiring a transfer to get to downtown Burbank from Hollywood, is fine. I don't want to build the K line to Burbank Airport along the Metrolink tracks because I now want that space for high-speed rail, considering I want to move the alignment. The new, more frequent combined AVOC Metrolink line can serve passengers going from downtown Burbank to the airport. The question is, do we have the K line stop at both Metrolink stations or just one, or both and the terminal, or have a people mover serve the terminal or the connections between them? There seem to be no great answers here. While we're saving boatloads of money on high-speed rail by not knocking down any of the new warehouses here, it does make the walk from the AVOC station to the new terminal more circuitous and along weird industrial roads for a third of a mile. But stopping K line at all three is, well, too many stops, and we want those connections to the two Metrolink stations to facilitate transfers, even though the Ventura County one will require the K line to be underground. And if the K line was the way to transfer between all three stops, it's not ideal to have a paid service acting essentially as the airport's internal train here. Ultimately, I think the not really satisfying answer is to stop the K line at both Metrolink stations, and instead of a people mover, just use shuttle buses to connect between the stations and the terminal. They're lower capacity, but Burbank is a capacity-capped airport, so I don't think they would be overwhelmed. And now that we have a Burbank Airport direct connection to Hollywood, we don't need the B line to stop there too. So let's add another connection to the new Meridian line at Laurel Canyon instead, with an intermediate Victory station. So that leaves us with two lines that want to go east. From Glendale, I'm going to have them interline along the NoHo-Pasadena line route together, but between the Burbank Studio District and Glendale, they'll diverge. The new R line will take over the NoHo-Pasadena route, although shifting from Central and Broadway to Brandon, Colorado, and the G line will duck under Griffith Park with a Zoo stop and a Meridian line stop as a more direct express route between Glendale, Pasadena, and the Valley without diverting it up to Burbank and down again. And finally, a new Vermont heavy rail line will come up to give Glendale another connection to Central LA, but it'll travel along Glendale Boulevard all the way up to Montrose. Now, the notable major downside to this plan is that you can't run maximum frequency on these huge sections of these two lines without some turnback trains due to interlining. But I don't know that you'd really actually max out capacity because of that. I think it could still handle the demand. If anything, the combined Southeast Gateway East San Fernando Valley line would probably max out first, and you could build it with the long tunnel instead of the interline if you're afraid that's going to happen. Going back to the map, I really do think this is a great option for unwinding this valley knot, but honestly, I'll probably have a completely different idea for it tomorrow, and I'll hate this version forever. I would love to see dozens of competing ideas for how to route these lines, and I'd love for Metro to identify an ideal system and work toward it, because decisions that will enable or preclude options are happening now, and will continue to happen, and we should take the future into account. Whew. Now, since this is all the rail we've got for the valley, that means filling out the rest with BRT. First, I've got an LA County BRT line picking up where the Ventura County one left off. This is going to divert to the Warner Center, a big ridership driver, and one that I am not serving with rail, even though it really could be. Connect to the G line, and then come back down to Ventura until it hits our new R line at Burbank Boulevard. It travels down Burbank Boulevard until ducking down to Magnolia on Sepulveda, and then to Riverside via Hazeltine, until it finally connects again with the G line, heads back up Vineland to Magnolia, and terminates at downtown Burbank Station. This is broadly an east-west-south valley line to fill in the gap between the G and R lines, and serve the Warner Center and connect to Ventura County. North of it, we'll have a much simpler east-west line that pretty much travels on Sherman until it needs to go up and around Burbank Airport before coming back through downtown Burbank from the other side and terminating. Then we fill out our valley east-west routes with a BRT starting at Chatsworth and running alongside the tracks until Nordhoff, where it becomes the revenge of the cancelled North Valley BRT until it turns down Woodman and terminates at Ventura. This creates almost a grid of rapid transit lines in the valley that serves nearly all major corridors and ridership drivers. But we're not quite done. I've got one more BRT hitting the valley, starting all the way up at Santa Clarita's Metrolink station, hitting Magic Mountain, College of the Canyons, and Cal Arts before popping onto the 5 into San Fernando, and covering La Crescenta and La Cañada all the way down to Pasadena, where we'll leave it for now before picking it back up once we're over there. For now, let's head down to the west side in central LA. The D line comes to the ocean, the Lincoln BRT gets converted to a C line extension, which I've opted to keep fully grade separated despite the expense, as the rest of the C line to this point is also grade separated. I'm categorizing this as medium rail here, the weird category of fully grade separated light rail, which can sometimes go by light metro across the pond. It's a weird category, and as you soon learn if you're immersed in the transit world, none of these terms like light or heavy rail have any actual consistent definition anyway, so why not confuse it even more? As I've just mentioned, the combined Southeast Gateway East San Fernando Valley line goes through Hollywood, swerving around the K line and serving Silver Lake, Echo Park, and Dodger Stadium, wiping out the northern portion of this Sunset Quick Build BRT, but that's okay. It'll get replaced soon. I have, however, made a change here from existing plans, because there's still time to alter them. In 2022, Metro briefly considered interlining the Southeast Gateway line, with the A line starting on the approach to Union Station. While this might be hard to schedule right, it theoretically shouldn't impact capacity on the A line as its capacity becomes halved one station down anyway on the regional connector, nor on the Southeast Gateway East San Fernando Valley combined line. I'm just gonna start calling this the T line, because of the shared section up on Ventura. Nor would it matter that the T Little Tokyo platforms would have to be elevated and force a bad connection, because there was going to be an above-ground connection forced anyway due to the apparent lack of knockout panels in the underground regional connector station. This allows it to stay elevated all the way through downtown, massively reducing the cost of this phase, and requires no new platforms at Union, massively reducing the cost of this phase, and changing my Union Station design from literally the last video in the series. I have it continuing to interline through Chinatown, making it really ugly on this map, but what can you do? Before turning off to go to Dodger Stadium just past it, which is an alignment I proposed a few years back. I don't know why this option wasn't carried forward by Metro, but it really does seem like a no-brainer to me. You'll still have to contend with the locals who, frustratingly, like everywhere in LA, are fighting an elevated train, but in my fantasy world here, Metro has the guts to say no to them. And, worth noting, while this planned industrial district station may feel a bit remote, there are 2 proposed studio lots immediately adjacent to the station with a combined 26 sound stages, so there are real signs of life here. Okay, what else? The new Vermont Heavy Rail line goes through Westlake and Echo Park up to Glendale. We'll pick up the south end in a bit. The biggest rail addition here will be my Venice Pico line, which will be the subject of my next video in this series, and will be almost ludicrously in-depth. I've opted to actually design this as a heavy rail line as well, but using the model for the Sepulveda line pitched by Bechtel with shorter automated trains, and same with the Vermont line. This will allow the platform length to remain more akin to light rail, massively reducing costs, hopefully without sacrificing too much capacity. So as such, this will be fully grade separated, traveling from Venice Beach to Midtown Crossing on Venice, where it will shift to Pico until downtown, where it will create a third downtown subway hitting the Fashion District before traveling to Union under Los Angeles Street. And here at Union, if the T line does end up sharing a platform with the A line, that means this new line's tracks need to only be 3 levels deep instead of 4, saving money. I'll pick it up on the other side of Union when we get to that part of town. Then we'll have a short extension of the Sepulveda line to SoFi. If you saw my recent 2024 update video, you'll know that the Inglewood Transit Connector may have just bitten the dust. However, I did not expect that to happen when I made the entire slate of graphics for this video, so I'm going to draw on here the extension to the C line that I would have recommended were it to be built, but at the very end of the video I'm going to replace this with a circulator BRT instead. And finally, I'll make a brand new Slauson line starting at Playa Vista. Now, remember when I mentioned my LAX Express tunnel and how it would get more complicated? Yeah. Where the Harbor Sub and Slauson meet, this rail line would travel along the exact same route with 2 extra stations, one connecting to the Slauson 110 BRT station, and one at Slauson Avalon. So, how will this work? The idea is that everything between Slauson Junction and Vermont Slauson will be one long, 56-foot diameter single bore. The bottom level would be the mainline tracks, and it would require the SB LAX line to run single-level trains, and the upper level would be this Q line light rail. The two local Q line stations would fit entirely within the bore, requiring excavation only for the access to the sides, but the two stations with the SB LAX and Angel stops will require obscenely massive deep excavation to allow for platforms and high-speed rail bypass tracks on the bottom, and, in the case of Vermont, a perpendicular underground line. Yes, this would be comically, astronomically expensive, worse than the Silicon Valley BART single bore, easily my most expensive segment in this entire plan. Yes, I think it'd ultimately, years down the line, be worth it. I'll pick up the Q line east of here in a bit. Now, let's talk BRT, and holy shit, there's a lot. Beginning with our east-west lines, the northernmost is the 14 line that starts in Malibu, where the Ventura County BRT ends. I just added this at the very end of the process because I don't think it's super realistic that Malibu is about to give up 2 lanes of PCH. Basically, its only road to be bus only, but a boy can dream. Malibu should be accessible to the people, damn it. That line then travels down through downtown Santa Monica, connecting with the D and E lines and paralleling the C, where it starts running with the 15 BRT line to Pico, with the 14 running as local and the 15 as an express. It'll shunt up from Pico to Bundy, from Bundy to Santa Monica, to Burton Way, Robertson, and Beverly Boulevard. At the Beverly Center, they split. The 15 runs along Beverly all the way to downtown and Union Station, and the 14 runs along 3rd to downtown and Union Station. Why do I have 2 BRT lines so close together? Isn't a line on 3rd redundant when there's rapid transit lines above it on Beverly and below it on Milshire? I had thought so, but the bus ridership numbers on 3rd are shockingly high. Higher than Beverly, actually. So I think the service is warranted. I'll pick them up on the other side of Union when we get to that subregion. Next, I have both the 12 and 13 lines starting together in Playa del Rey, traveling on Manchester before diverting just past Sepulveda. The 13 winds a bit, going up La Tijera to Centinela before coming back down La Brea and turning onto Florence. It stays on Florence for a while, and we'll pick it up past the A line later. The 12, for its part, is very simple. It just stays on Manchester, and we'll pick it up past the A line in a bit. Okay, let's talk north-south BRT. The 21 starts at the Getty Center, traverses Brentwood on Barrington, and then joins with the 14 and 15. But instead of turning down Pico, it stays on Bundy, becoming Centinela, before turning on Sepulveda and terminating at the LAX Metro station. The quick-build BRT La Cienega line, which I'm calling the 7, is already drawn to the extent that Measure M might fund it, but it gets extended south to the LAX Metro station, and north of Santa Monica Boulevard to Sunset, where it continues to terminate at Hollywood and Highland. We're making this a major transfer station, with a Westside COG requested La Brea BRT ending here as well. That line, the 6, will travel down La Brea, briefly divert to Midtown Crossing Station, although I've drawn it straight on the map and kinked the K line because I thought it looked better. Then it goes back to La Brea until it becomes Hawthorne, and we'll pick it up south of the C line in a minute. The 5 line takes over part of the quick-build Sunset BRT, starting in Glendale at Broadway and Brand, hitting the Glendale Metrolink station, going down Los Feliz Boulevard, and then going down Western, and stopping at the C line where it builds an infill Western station, and where we'll pick it back up in a sec. The 4 will share part of this route from Chevy Chase. East of Chevy Chase I'll hit when we discuss Northeast LA, but south it turns from Los Feliz onto Vermont, where it takes over the remaining Vermont BRT, which I have ending at Florence, where the road becomes wide enough that the rail line can take over the median with an elevated alignment. The 22 starts out east, but for now we'll discuss a section from Union Station to Little Tokyo, and taking over the Broadway Quick-Build BRT in its totality, serving as a bit of a local to the J-Lines Express, which I've renamed the 1 line in my system. The 2 line starts north of Union, but for now we'll discuss it coming south from Union on San Pedro and Avalon, filling in a big gap in the network. We'll pick it up south of the C line in a minute. The final thing we'll do here is actually grade separate the K line. I've decided to do this to turn it into a, quote, medium rail line because it's feasible for it to be grade separated everywhere else I'll be taking it. These are the intersections that will need to be grade separated, some with road closures and some with trenching. Expensive and disruptive, but ultimately worth it, I think, especially since we'll have to briefly interline it with another fully grade separated medium rail line, the C line. This will help both keep a very regular schedule and mitigate delays. And I believe that finishes out this subregion. You can see how, especially in South LA, we're starting to build a real grid, leaning heavily on BRT to fill in some crucial gaps. We'll see a whole lot more of that as we head further south to the South Bay, covering the section south of the C line and west of the A line. There's only 2 rail lines to speak of here. First, we're going to bring the Vermont line all the way down to San Pedro, diverting it to Western before having it travel under 6 and ending with a station on Terminal Island for the Port of LA. A lot of people work there, and I figure a direct connection to the island with shuttles to the various container terminals would be helpful. Then the K line. This is the trickiest section to grade separate due to the narrowness of the right-of-way and the desire to keep a freight rail track, but I do believe it can be done with trenching. It'll then leave the harbor subdivision for Sepulveda, because that's a much better place for it to connect to the Vermont line, and then I have it elevated alongside Figueroa until Anaheim Street, where it will travel through Wilmington and then duck underground before the river. We'll pick up the Long Beach section in a bit. For BRT, let's start north-south. The 8 line begins at the LAX Metro station, traveling down Sepulveda, and then diverts onto the old rail right-of-way just south of Rosecrans to facilitate good access to the beach cities, which will probably never let that route become rail, but which should at least let buses on it. At Torrance Boulevard, it returns to PCH and runs all the way to our next section, where I'll pick it up. Picking up the 6 line where we left it, it travels all the way down Hawthorne to Palos Verdes, with only a brief detour to Redondo Beach Transit Center. Picking up the 5, it continues down Western until it turns down Weymouth and San Pedro, which becomes 13th, finally turning back to hit downtown San Pedro's rail station. I'm stretching the 1 down to Cabrillo Beach, and bringing the 2 down Avalon to downtown Wilmington. For east-west, let's start with the 11, which simply travels down Rosecrans until we pick it up later. Next, the 10, which starts on Artesia, but shunts up onto Redondo Beach Boulevard until it becomes Compton. We'll keep following this, since it only goes just east of the A-line, diverting briefly onto Rosecrans before heading up Long Beach Boulevard, and then it travels on Randolph before terminating at Slauson Junction. The 9, meanwhile, starts on Torrance Boulevard before shunting down Prairie to Carson, where it continues for a while until the road ends, forcing it to turn down Santa Fe, and then turn onto Willow, where we'll pick it up soon. Pulling back, you can see that the grid pretty much continues through the South Bay, but we're leaning far more on BRT than rail down here, befitting its lower density. Still, it has good corridor coverage and a lot of infill potential along the transit routes to concentrate future development. We're now going to head back up to Northeast LA, East LA, and the San Gabriel Valley. Rail-wise, let's start with the R and G lines. Now, we're going to shift them from Memorial Park back onto Colorado, but turning south on the hill with the station convenient to both Caltech and Pasadena City College. Now, there's this real dense area of Huntington Drive over here that I really want to serve with rail, but I don't think a rail line all the way up Huntington makes sense due to it traversing a pretty low-density area of San Marino. But I do think this combined RG line could shift underground, stopping at Huntington Gardens to emerge onto Huntington here and end at the A-Line's Arcadia station. Now I'm going to dip briefly into the gateway cities to continue the Q line. It'll go down Slauson until turning up Atlantic, but crucially not interlining with the E line. This will be aerial, where the E line is underground here. This goes all the way through Alhambra before curving up onto Huntington and then Fair Oaks, where it will then shift onto the A line alignment and interline with it until Memorial Park. This line is otherwise entirely grade separated, but I do feel like interlining it here makes the most sense, so c'est la vie. I also really want this line to hit the Rose Bowl, which means some difficult excavation under Memorial Park itself for a junction, and then a tunnel to the stadium. The idea behind this whole line is creating a semicircle through East and South LA, connecting a lot of lines that otherwise would be cut off by the LA River. Next, for an eastern north-south route, we're turning Streets for All's proposed Hill-to-Sea BRT corridor on Rosemead and Lakewood into a fully grade-separated medium rail line. Expensive, but for a line of this length, I think it's worth it so the north-south travel times aren't abysmal. From Sierra Madre Villa, we're taking it down to the E line, where we'll pause it for now until we hit the gateway cities. Next, the Venice Pico X line. We'll take it to Lincoln Park for a big transfer station that we're going to build here. More on that in the next video. And there's room to run this along the Alhambra subdivision for a little while, but then we'll duck it underground to go straight to Garvey via Cal State LA. At Garvey, it becomes elevated. Now, I went through contortions to try to bring this line up to downtown El Monte before coming back down again, but ultimately I decided it's just not really worth it. while there is new development going in, there's still just not that much going down in downtown Almonte, and I think it's cleaner to give the X line a Metrolink connection by adding an infill Metrolink station at 5 points. Oh, wait, we already did that. How convenient. So now you can see this 5-point station here solves kind of a lot of problems at once, and there's a lot of development potential around here. Again, more on that in the next video. Anyway, we cross the San Gabriel River and travel along Walnut Creek, potentially sharing an elevated structure with high-speed rail to San Diego here, with stations at Baldwin Park Medical Center, Francis Quito, West Covina Civic Center, and ending at Glendora Avenue. There's a world where this line continues another 5-ish miles in a tunnel to Mount San Antonio College and takes over the Arrows route to Ontario Airport, except traveling on Holt, but that A, requires a new set of tracks, whereas outside of the tunnel, Arrow uses mainline existing ones, and B, has us cover a long distance without any really great stops, and C, gets us into San Bernardino County, so I opted to let Regional Rail be Regional Rail and provide the link to that area, along with the A-Line extension to Ontario Airport, which does, of course, dip into San Bernardino County. Worth noting that this eastern half of the X-Line could instead be an extension of the D-Line, which has a junction ready built for underground, but D-Line style heavy rail would require longer platforms, which would complicate the design of this line in a way that Bechtel style automated short train heavy rail wouldn't, hence why I opted to make it an extension of the Venice Pico X-Line instead. Now, finally, we're going to extend the E-Line all the way into Orange County at Harbor, and then, perhaps most crazily, we're going to add a whole new line here. Now, this will be a line broadly crossing both LA and Orange counties. I originally had it mostly just in LA County and called it the Z-Line and LA Metro Line, but ultimately I decided rail down Harbor in Orange County made sense, which made this line 2/3 in Orange County, so I opted to make this an octa line that travels into LA County, which will be counterbalanced by some LA lines that travel into Orange County. So this begins the A-Line and travels down Azusa, diverting west underground to hit the X-Line terminus in West Covina, before returning to Azusa and coming under the Puente Hills to Harbor in Orange County, where the E-Line terminates and where I'll leave it for now. This area has a lot of BRTs, so let's get on with that. I've wiped out the end of the Sunset Quick Build BRT, but I'll use some of that route with this end of the 14, taking it first down Chavez until Soto, and bringing it all the way down Whittier until it diverts into downtown Whittier on Philadelphia, stopping at Whittier College before heading down to Painter and terminating at the E-Line. This is kind of making up for the sins of not routing the B-Line and then not routing the E-Line down Whittier, which would have been better than Washington. But with the E-Line on Washington, 2 rail lines in that close proximity are probably not viable, so BRT it will have to be. Next, the 1 line will extend along Ramona to Baldwin Park, down Badillo, and up Citrus to end at the A-Line. We're really going to crowd downtown El Monte on the map here. It may not get the X-Line, but it does get a BRT bonanza. The 15 line we're going to take from Union Station until it stops at downtown El Monte. Truly, this section of the map is hideous, don't look. And takes over the San Gabriel Valley East-West BRT route, but instead of ending it at downtown Pomona, we'll continue it to Ontario Airport along the SBX Purple Line route, which I'm calling the SBX3. That route will in turn use the 15 line's route briefly past downtown Pomona until it hops onto the 10 to reach West Covina. Then the 22 comes out of Union up Huntington with a brief diversion to our Lincoln Park station, but it avoids that low-density part of San Marino by switching to Main and taking its high-density route as it becomes Las Tunas, Live Oak, and then the Arrow Highway. It's going to briefly divert to Foothill before coming back down to Pomona North Station, where it ends. But we'll have another BRT line, the 13, take Arrow straight from Pomona North Station, briefly share space with the 1, head down Glendora and Hacienda, briefly share space with the 15, and go over the Puente Hills on Colima to the E-Line. This is the same as the Florence line from earlier and will connect the 2 ends when we get to the gateway cities. It's a long line, a short 54 miles. But hey, the A-Line here is 72 miles, so yeah. Let's see, what else? The The 2 line continues north from Union up to Eagle Rock. The 4 line takes a winding route to connect Glendale to Highland Park via York before traveling up Huntington and going past Arcadia through Duarte, ending at its A-line station. The 19 continues past Memorial Park with the R and G lines, but stays on Colorado and ends at Sierra Madre Villa with the L line. And the 20 line starts at Foothill and travels all the way down Peck, putting the f***ed up bow on our shitty-looking pocket of El Monte on this map, and connecting to downtown Whittier with the 14 line. However, while the 14 ends at the E line, I'll have the 20 continue on in a bit. I'll do the rest of San Bernardino County's BRT when I get over there. So that's east and northeast LA in the San Gabriel Valley. A lot of BRT, but also a really decent amount of rail access, with nearly every high-density corridor covered. On to the gateway cities and Long Beach. The L line, we're going to continue bringing down Lakewood with an infill station connecting to the Southeast Gateway T line, and then instead of going to CSU Long Beach like the Hill to Sea concept, I have that covered by other routes, we're going to bring it down to Broadway and run it near the coast all the way to First Station on the A line. The C line, we're going to extend past Norwalk Santa Fe Springs, where Metro M will take it, down Imperial Highway all the way to Orange County, where we'll complete it in a minute. The K line, meanwhile, will act as a second crosstown rail for Long Beach along Anaheim before ducking underground to hit a much more centrally located Cal State Long Beach station. From there, it will also continue to Orange County, which we'll also hit in a minute. BRT time. First, the 20 comes down Painter and Carmenita, stopping at Norwalk Santa Fe Springs, and then jutting down Norwalk Boulevard for a stop at Firestone and the part of downtown Norwalk that they plan to do a lot of work to. It then starts down Pioneer before taking a slightly meandering route to hit Cerritos College and Los Cerritos Center, before going back down Pioneer to Carson, where it'll travel toward an end at Long Beach Airport. Nearby, let's link both ends of the 13. From the west, it travels down Florence until Pioneer, where it shunts down to Imperial Highway to run to Norwalk Santa Fe Springs, which I'm turning into the area's biggest hub. Then goes back up Carmenita, and then Mills to hook back up with the other end. The 12, if you remember, we had left on Manchester, where it keeps going as it turns into Firestone all the way until Imperial Highway, where it too ends at Norwalk Santa Fe Springs. Unsurprisingly, it's the exact same story for the 11, which we had left on Rosecrans. After briefly detouring south to hit Compton Station, it stays on Rosecrans all the way until Bloomfield, where it goes up until it too ends at Norwalk Santa Fe Springs, which should finally complete that station's connections. You can see the value of adding back high-speed rail service here. Further down, the 9 will continue down Willow until it turns up Lakewood to end at Long Beach Airport, and the 8 will continue down PCH until the Circle, where it will use Hill to Seas routing to go to Cal State Long Beach, but with a final dogleg back up to the K-Line station where it will end. Oh, and I forgot to mention, but the remainder of the Quick Build BRT on Atlantic will stay as the 3, just ending at Maywood where the Q line picks up the rest of that route. And finally, there will also be 3 Orange County BRT lines coming into this area. 2 just peek in, so I'll hit those when I hit Orange County, but 1 adds yet another crosstown service for Long Beach, this time on 7th. It actually starts at 5th Street Station, but then goes down 7th and hits Cal State Long Beach, where we're going to leave it for now. That's it for this subregion, and you can see Long Beach in particular is absolutely peppered with service now. The vast majority of people below the 405 would be within a half mile of at least one rapid transit stop. Now let's go to San Bernardino County. We've already added the Arrow extension to give it a more Metrolink rail service, along with the Imperial line, so we're just going to be rounding out things here with a few more BRTs. Plus, an Ontario Airport People Mover that I suggested in my Ontario video, which I'll draw on now, serving more terminals that may one day exist, and the Convention Center. So for the BRT, SBX3 is already a mix of the SBX Purple Line and Mid-Valley Connector, but more of an express Mid-Valley Connector. The SBX2 will be a local version of that stays on Foothill all the way into LA County to end at Pomona North Station. And the 3 will extend through San Bernardino proper to hit San Bernardino Airport and end at Imava Casino. The SBS6 will also go through San Bernardino proper. You can see that downtown San Bernardino is our hub here, and travels south to parallel the 10 on San Bernardino Ave and then Valley before we end it at Ontario Airport. This line contains what will be the second best station name in the region, with Peppermill. The 5 also ends at Ontario Airport, but very straightforwardly goes up Haven to end at Chaffey College. And finally, I'm going to make the SBX4 a great big loop that half exists in LA County, hitting the downtowns of Ontario, Upland, Pomona, and Chino. This feels like it covers most major corridors in San Bernardino County and gives them some good options for transit-oriented development. For Riverside County, we've got one BRT coming south from Ontario Airport to Corona, ending at the high-speed rail station. Another is a loop of Moreno Valley, which felt like it merited some transit service. And the third starts in Moreno Valley, hits UC Riverside and downtown Riverside, and then travels down Magnolia to Corona, ending at Corona West, covering the spine of density between Riverside and Corona in Riverside County. Now, this is only like 2/3 of a mile on average away from the Imperial Line, which covers the same route on the other side of the 91, but I think both links are justified. The BRT hits more of the existing destinations, while the hybrid rail route hits more development potential, and could be a faster link between the two cities. Finally, I do have one Orange County BRT line sharing some space with Riverside 1 and 2 lines to the Corona high-speed rail station before heading to Orange County, but we'll pick that back up there in a sec. So that's Riverside County, covering primarily 2 major corridors, but with added hybrid and regional rail, creating more ways for people to traverse the region without a car from the smaller cities. That just leaves, finally, Orange County. As I mentioned in my second airport video, there are a lot of different ways you can route transit in Orange County, and right now their biggest issues are that OCTA is essentially useless as a transit agency, and the average voter in Orange County is, well, not exactly a transit head. But assuming those can be overcome and you can start to serve Orange County, where do we start? The best place to begin looking is probably the 2018 Orange County Transit Vision Report. You can see in their transit propensity graphic that North County is much more likely to use transit than South County, which makes sense. The study was pretty thorough in identifying ideal corridors. I mean, come on LA, even Orange County has a future vision study like this. A few things surprised me. Now, I had originally made an Orange County grid that had some type of east-west line, usually BRT, very regularly every 2 miles, on Lincoln, Catella, Garden Grove, and Bolsa, but it seemed to my surprise I was skipping some of the best corridors. Most notably, 17th Westminster is one of the highest demand corridors, and Chapman is another recommended corridor. It also recommended La Palma over Lincoln east of Beach, but I'm kind of surprised at that given that La Palma skirts north of downtown Anaheim, while Lincoln goes through it, so that one I'm kind of ignoring. North-south, you can see the primary corridors are Beach, Harbor, Bristol State College, and Maine. So my goal here is to cover a lot of the same ground, but I'm going to do it a little differently. You can see that this report is somewhat more realistic on modes given current transit demand in Orange County, the highest demand corridors only meriting rapid streetcar at best, akin to the western portion of the OC streetcar, while the rest is either BRT or just rapid bus. But we're designing a very long-term plan toward a more idealized transit-forward future in this video, so things will get a bit of an upgrade here. And the first question is, what do we do with the T-line since it can no longer go to downtown Santa Ana on the Pacific Electric right-of-way as originally planned thanks to the OC streetcar taking up that route? Well, I think the second best thing is to have the 2 meet at Catella, or more specifically just north of Catella at Beach. We'll bring the T-line down to Orange County with a stop at Cypress College and Beach here, and then bring the OC streetcar up along the right-of-way to end at Beach, keeping it fully grade-separated past Garden Grove, and with a discussed infill at Willowick. Then we turn the T-line down Catella. There's going to be some contortions to get it to stop at Disneyland, which we'll go over in a minute, but this brings it to Anaheim's high-speed rail station, and this whole area desperately needs to be redeveloped as a transit-oriented village. And then I'll have it paralleling the Metrolink tracks through downtown Orange before hooking back over to Maine, where we'll end in downtown Santa Ana at the streetcar. So we do still get it to downtown Santa Ana. So that's 2 LA Metro lines coming into Orange County now. why not add a third and a fourth? The K line stays underground with a stop at Leisure World before emerging on Westminster to cover this whole corridor to the Santa Ana Metrolink station. And then the C line comes all the way to Yorba Linda. And finally, that'll be it for LA lines coming into Orange County. Now for Octa's rail lines. I've opted to build their 3 new lines as totally grade separated medium rail. I know, realism and all, but there's room for it to be fully grade separated, and damn it, it should be. The most important is the centerline concept. The idea behind this line is for it to come first and cover a ton of Orange County's destinations, making it slightly windy, but accumulating hopefully a huge ridership in the process, and serving as the core of an Octa transit network that you can then build out from. I actually have this starting right where the E line leaves off, and my idea for the station would actually be to design it like 7th Metro, where the Harbor line is bored, with the platform 2 levels down, and the E and Center lines both have platforms on the mezzanine level on either side of the Harbor line, with the idea that you could merge these into a single continuous service if there was ever a reason to, even just for special events, but I figure having a transfer here to let the counties more or less handle their own space makes more sense. The center line comes down to Brea Mall, Cal State Fullerton, Fullerton College, and Fullerton Metrolink Station, while the Harbor line comes directly down Harbor to the Fullerton Station, and then these two guys interline for a minute through to Disneyland. I'm putting a station here on Disney Way where all 3 lines can have a stop closer to the entrance. Beyond this station, the 2 lines split with a flying junction, and the center line travels along the T line, but on separate tracks, not interlined, to Anaheim Station, after which it'll dip under the T line to hit UC Irvine Med Center and Santa Ana College, travel below the K line on 17th, and then below the T line again on Main. On this rail right-of-way, it's going to briefly switch back onto Bristol to hit South Coast Metro, where there will be a huge new development, and South Coast Plaza, before coming back around for the airport, UC Irvine, Concordia University, the Irvine Medical Center, the Spectrum Center, and ending at Irvine Station. It does wind a bit, but this should bring a lot of riders into the system. The Harbor line, meanwhile, doesn't wind at all. It just stays on Harbor all the way to Newport Beach, where it ends on the peninsula at Newport Beach Pier and the Banana Stand. Our final Octa rail line is also going to be relatively straightforward. It starts at Friendly Hills on Colima and La Mirada Boulevard until it turns down beach until a brief detour to hit downtown Huntington Beach. From there it becomes an east-west line on Hamilton and Victoria and pops up to the airport to terminate, with a station at the fairgrounds and Vanguard University. And this line happens to also host the very best station name on our new regional network. Beach Ball! So, including the streetcar, we've got all 4 of our north-south corridors and our biggest east-west corridor mostly covered by rail. Now to fill it out with 8 BRT lines. Let's start with the 2 we've already seen. The OC2 will head east from Cal State Long Beach, meet the K at Leisure World, and then head up to Chapman, taking it all the way to Santiago Canyon College. OC6, meanwhile, comes west from Riverside County on a mix of freeway and surface before settling onto Lincoln and staying there, with only a short jaunt to hit the Cypress College station, until it becomes Carson and ending with the 20 at Long Beach Airport. Our third and final Octa BRT hitting LA County, the OC1, starts at Long Beach Airport as well, but then heads south instead to go east on Willow, becoming Catella, traveling with the T and Center line before ending at Anaheim Station. This gives a direct link from LGB to Disneyland. And actually I lied, I forgot that one more Octa BRT does hit LA County still, the OC7. It starts at downtown Pomona and takes the 57 down to Brea Mall and travels down State College until Anaheim Station, where it more or less rejoins the center line for a bit, albeit on a longer, windier above-ground route, and then heads down Bristol. Then it turns down Dyer, which becomes Baraka Parkway, traversing all of Irvine, and then becoming one of 2 South County BRT lines with a winding journey through the twists and turns of South County before hitting Laguna Niguel Mission Viejo Metrolink Station, and ending at Antonio Parkway in Ladera Ranch. The other, OC3, shares the leg on this side of Laguna Niguel Mission Viejo, but then hops onto the 5 briefly to get up to the other section of South County with significant expected transit demand. After Irvine Station, we hook around Great Park and stay on Irvine Boulevard until downtown Tustin. From there, it turns onto McFadden before going up Fairview to cross the county on Bolsa until zigzagging down to Sunset Beach. OC8 starts here at Sunset Beach as well, but shortly zigzags the opposite direction to travel down to Albert MacArthur. It ends by hitting the airport and providing a separate route to UC Irvine, hitting more housing along the way. Also ending at UC Irvine is OC4, which travels down to the Newport Center, over to Huntington Beach, and up Brookhurst, and then Euclid, before briefly joining Harbor to end at Fullerton Station. OC5 shares some of that right-of-way, starting at Newport Beach, but diverging from the 4 to go directly to the airport, then up Red Hill, and then Newport to downtown Tustin, where it will zag over Tustin Avenue, covering the east side of Orange County all the way up to Yorba Linda. And hey, that's it. Comparing our Orange County against the projected transit demand map, I think we did a pretty good job. And going back to the regional view, let's do that final replacement of the now probably defunct Inglewood Transit Connector with a circulator BRT line, and the 6 could divert onto this line directly during events, which I'm showing with a dashed line. So here it is, my final grand plan of the Los Angeles metro area. You'll see I have some off-map San Diego MTS lines listed. I'll do San Diego at some point in another video. Some of this is probably wise, some of it is probably harebrained, but I mostly think it's fodder for more ideas and discussion. A way for us to think about how we want to plan the transit we're building now to enable the best version of the future. I sped through this, although you wouldn't know it looking at the runtime, and left out a lot of detail that informed some of my decisions here. Much of that will be discussed in the videos to come, where I will break down specific lines in much, much greater detail. Those videos will each be a huge amount of work, but they should be pretty fun if you're the kind of person, like me, with a convoluted brain that finds this sort of thing fun. Our first deep dive will be on the X line, no relation to new awful Twitter, which I find to be one of the most interesting. I don't know when it will come, but keep a lookout. Thanks for watching.